Today's chat is brought to you by Loot Crate. Save 10% on any new subscription at www.trylootcrate.com/FFC. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings.
Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome back for episode 114 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on December 29th, 2017 over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Big shout out to our live chat here. Thank you so much for joining us for another evening back in the tower. This is your host, Blue Crew 86. Alongside me, we have the man who has been said to have the voice of a flower and the internet speed of AOL, Justin Sane. I don't even... What is your name this week, actually? Because you didn't change it.
I'll think of it mid-show and completely screw everybody up.
Just screw everyone up. Okay, so anyways,
nah.
How's the data connection treating you this week?
So I'm streaming at up to 2.5 megabits a second, and that equals times 1,000 divided by 1,000 times the inverse sine of the tangent, and it's slow.
It's slow.
Pins, check my math, please.
I really want somebody to draw this math out and just send a tweet of Sharpie math, and then it equals it's slow.
Science.
Why do I feel like this would turn into a corkboard conversation?
Yes,
where it's just lines of things going from place to place. Anyway,
what is it the Always Sunny in Seattle? Isn't that the? Oh my gosh. Yep. Oh well, we also have with us the one and only Green Eye Music Lover. Green, hope you're doing well. Staying warm, I hope.
It's warmer here than it is where you're at.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't have snow right now.
I hate you a little bit for that.
It's supposed to have the Arctic winds coming in on Sunday for us.
They gave us the forecast for tomorrow, where we have been warned to take warm clothes wherever we go if we leave the house.
That and just have blankets in the vehicles just in case.
Yeah.
If my forecast ever involves Arctic winds, I'm going somewhere else. That's the time. Been a good run. We're done.
You're fine. You're south of the point. No.
If your forecast ever involved Arctic winds, there would be a lot to worry about. Let's just be honest there.
This is true.
You might not have to worry about snakes though.
Yeah, that's true. That is a benefit of Arctic winds, Justin. I don't know. Yeah, it's is he?
All of a sudden, he goes quiet. Yeah.
Maybe
for
not.
Anyways,
going to get disconnected.
Well, as you can hear, we also have the grizzly bearded lore master himself, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing. Wait, what day is it?
It is Friday.
It's the weekend.
It's the weekend.
Is it Friday finally? Okay.
It's Friday.
No, that little example.
Not that.
Full stop. Anyway, that little example is just to show you how I don't know what day it is, and I've lost track of time nearly entirely. If it wasn't for the fact that I came home, looked at my calendar, and went, I think it's Friday. All right, FFC's tonight. I wouldn't have known. So besides tired and ludicrously out of place with time, you might think I'm Osiris. What?
I was going to make that joke, but I didn't want to make you too vexed.
What, feel older than I am? That's fine.
No, I didn't want to vex you.
Oh.
I didn't want to go for the low-hanging apple of Discord.
See, I didn't. Mine at least made sense. Mine you didn't have to stretch for.
It's a fruit.
It's a
low-hanging fruit.
It's all right. Just like Devrim K, I'll just give you some Vex milk, and that'll be the end of you, Justin.
I do say that was rather neighborly of you.
Well, you see.
I did know
that at some point.
Yeah. Beard and I already have kind of started that chat.
I don't want to kill Devrim.
But I know, Beard, you had mentioned that you did have something you wanted to bring up in the intro piece real quick. That was actually something that happened pretty close to me in real life.
I used to live there.
I was going to say I wanted to wait to see where we wanted to fit it, but yeah, this is a very big topic. So recently there was a swatting attempt that was done. If you're not familiar with the idea of swatting, basically somebody ends up calling the cops on a streamer or anything like it, and it basically ends in this quote-unquote hilarious method in which you see the guy on stream have the cops outside of the door and basically break everything down because they were told that you're like a terrorist or something else is going on. A very long story short at this point, it ended in somebody calling the cops and the cops showing up at a home and shooting a guy.
Yeah.
Where at this point it now is questionable how everything was going. And now again, we have to go ahead and start questioning police, this, that, and the other thing. But long story short, it comes down to the fact that the guy was just there streaming. He was having a good time with friends and fans and creators.
The guy who got shot, the guy who called gave them the wrong address. So the individual who was killed had absolutely nothing to do with the situation. If my understanding of that is correct. So
right.
Yes. It was a completely third party that wasn't even involved.
Yes.
The 28-year-old that got killed in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas, which that was not where that happened, was about a half mile where I used to live when I was in college, which is really freaky to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, I picked up on it and have been trying to follow the news all throughout the day, but just even the headline was enough for me to kind of stop at my tracks being like, I'm not streaming, but I'm a content creator enough that having this in the back of my mind is just, it's crazy to me to think about. Professor Broman has kind of done some very good things with making a video really quick, like what you can do to like inform law enforcement that like at this address I do stream, so if you hear anything, that's probably what's going on. And a number of other things that could possibly like go through to protect yourself at this point. Like it's just getting to that point where it's getting that bad.
And there have been multiple streamers that have had this happen to them. There's a reason why Gathalion has never let anybody but very close friends or people that were highly involved with GuardianCon know where he lives.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, beyond just, I mean, I don't mean to sound harsh, but beyond just common sense too. It's you don't put that's information that you just don't give out. Like, you know, it's for those of our generation. For those in our generation, you know, it's the whole stranger danger thing, which is, you know, generationally, I think is kind of the change. I don't know. People don't seem so concerned with it anymore, which is kind of weird for me.
Well, it's beyond that. I mean, there's more ways that people can get a hold of where you live rather than just an address.
Right.
There's IP stealing and all that stuff where you can figure it out a lot of the time, which is really terrifying.
Right.
But Beard, I was going to say, if you are a content creator or if you are a streamer or if you are someone who is even someone who is just in who plays a lot of competitive games. I think this particular instance, I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was a COD dispute. Like it was a Call of Duty dispute, which, you know, I don't mean to feed into that stereotype, but that is a stereotype for that game. If you're in the competitive, even you know, a little bit and casually, you know, if you do a lot of competitive gaming, you know, it is something that it doesn't hurt to inform law enforcement, hey, you know, this is, you know, what's going on, because the situation is just, it's easier to kind of be safe than sorry in that one. And, right, Vegemite in the chat is it's the no one would do it to me mentality. You don't want to fall into that because it's I don't normally encourage people to be paranoid like me, but this is one of those situations in which it's kind of important to be a little paranoid and to think a little bit outside of the, hey, I'm safe in my bubble kind of mindset.
Right.
Which is not, I hate having to say that. I hate even having to bring that up, but it also kind of goes back to, I think it was a few weeks ago when we were talking about, the salt in the community and how people are getting so bent out of shape. It's like, I mean, again, if you're to the point where you're going through the pain of hunting down someone's address to call the cops on them, I just kind of question, is that has that's transcended the enjoyment of a video game. That's, I mean, I don't know.
You gotta pull back at that point and start asking yourself questions like, what exactly is it that you're doing this for? What's your end goal behind it? Because if it is just to cause somebody a lot of grief, is there a lot of need for it? Like, seriously, right. It's just, especially when it ends up being a situation like this.
Well, and I mean, there's already, I mean, I'm following the story just because I just want to know how this is not going to end well for the individual who did this. There's already a lot of there's already very severe punishment being discussed, just even by the news outlets about stuff. And granted, they're not experts on the law or anything like that, but I would not be surprised if this gets punished fully.
Yeah, it's not gonna. Yeah, and it's just not gonna be a good time for this guy. Period. But sorry, Justin, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and if this appeals to you, or you think this is funny, or I just think you need to take a step back and realize that these people they're not NPCs in a game. These are real people with real lives, real bank accounts, real people depending on them for their income. I mean, these are real people. Like, when they're not streaming for you, they're walking around the earth, just trying to live their life. So,
and it's not just streamers too, though. That's the thing is, like, there's a lot of people who get swatted who are, like, you never would have heard of them, except they got put in the news because they got swatted. But yeah, one of the Dancing Veru in chat says that if as far as he knows, like, just even if you get caught for swatting, you get 20 years.
Yeah,
it's because I mean, and again, it's because you're tying up security resources. It's like, I mean, it's a legit thing. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Like, it's not worth it, really. But, so yeah, like I said, I knew, Beard, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about that, and it's a valid thing. If you guys have any questions, or you want to know more about what you can do to protect yourself or anything like that, definitely feel free to reach out to any of us. I encourage you, like Beard said, Broman. I think Broman, he did do a YouTube video, right? He put together a video of it. Okay,
one of his rare ones. Yeah.
I saw his tweet, but I didn't know if I didn't see the tweet about the video. So, definitely give that a look if you're at all curious, or like I said, our doors are always open to anyone who wants to chat about anything of that nature. Definitely. But where I know I'm looking forward to, let's move into tonight's discussion. So, looking forward to diving into the discussion. I know the team is here as well, but let's run through our standard intro notes real quick, and then we'll get right into it. Our topic for this week's chat is going to be a look at the Books of Sorrow. Before we jump into that, however, I do have a few housekeeping notes to run through. In our last chat, we discussed the dangers of artificial intelligence within the Destiny universe. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out the new FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of FocusFire Chat. If you don't mind, please give us some feedback on iTunes to let us know how we're doing, as well as helping us continue to grow. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday at around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a recap of the previous week's chat for those who are unable to participate. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found in our show notes or on our website. Podcasts focused on Destiny include Guardian Radio, the first and longest running Destiny podcast on the net, Guardian 1, a Destiny group dedicated to Guardians helping Guardians and discussing current Destiny news and happenings, Ghosts and Echoes, which is a collection of the Destiny audio grimoire from Destiny 1, and the network's newest edition, This Guardian Life, a podcast from the casual Guardian's perspective that highlights all Guardians, large and small. We do also have a non-Destiny focused podcast, The Enthusiast Life, which is a podcast that discusses a wide range of fun topics from within the entertainment world. Our next chat is going to be a discussion on the Hive siblings, so be sure to weigh in on the poll this weekend to let us know what topic you want to discuss after that. Links to that poll can be found on either Twitter at FocusFireChat or within our Discord server. I asked Green to put together a high-level summary of tonight's topic, and this is what she had to say.
The history of three sisters. The heirs to the Osmian throne were betrayed by their very teacher. In the Books of Sorrow, we gain insight into the perspective of our own enemies and how they ended up in a Faustian deal that pushed them to their greatest achievements, as well as their well, maybe. From Teox and the Helium Drinkers to the Leviathan and the Dead Worm, the three sisters depend on each other for survival, as well as comfort in their quest for vengeance. In what we have of the book so far, there lies 5 verses, arcs almost to the story. 1. Youth. 2. Worm gods and the fall of the Leviathan. 3. Near defeat and a desperate act. 4. To hell and back. 5. The gift mast. Each of the verses have subsets to each verse, and the stories are not as clear-cut as I'm attempting to summarize. But the idea that infuses them all, sword logic, and the quest to prove yourself the sharpest blade. The Books of Sorrow are both a history and a blueprint to many answers and debates in Destiny.
Before we jump into the information and thoughts that the community had about the Books of Sorrow, however, let's take a look at this week's Lost Lore. All right, so we actually have 2 things for Lost Lore this week. I have one that is regarding a term that I've seen a lot of questions about in regards to the Books of Sorrow, and then Beard and Green have a current event that occurred recently that they're going to talk about. They're very excited about. So real quick, I'm just going to knock mine out real quick. It's just actually a definition. I've seen a lot of people ask this, both from newcomers to the Destiny series and also people from Destiny 1. This was a very common question when we saw this term. Aiat, AIAT. It is a term that is used quite often in the Books of Sorrow and generally with the Hive in general. So a lot of people ask, what is this? Like, why is this something that, doesn't make any sense? And so there's a couple different ways to view it. Some will argue that it's what's called a lacuna, which is basically a lexical gap in the translation from the Books of Sorrow to English or human language in the Destiny universe. Others will argue that it's what's called an autological word. This is a word that basically describes itself. So an autological term is what it is, or the word. It's like wet. Wet would be an autological term. Not AT-AT. At. I like that. At. Sorry, chat's making fun of me.
No.
So what actually the definition is, and this is from Seth Dickinson, who wrote the Books of Sorrow. He says, "This is it, and its purpose is expression. Its meaning is the invocation of what it is. Its mission is to draw in the mind and make an incision of curiosity, and to be that incision which is a question and its own solution, to make one hunger for an answer whose answer is its own wanting. Aiat, this is it. It is that utterance." And then we actually do see a bit of a nod to it from within the Books of Sorrow itself. They say, and I think this is also talking about the final shape. They define it as, "It is a fire without fuel, burning forever, killing death, asking a question that is its own answer, entirely itself." And that's ending quote. So that's what it is. It's a term that is meant to make you think about the term, and that is its point, is to pique your curiosity so that your curiosity becomes piqued. Have fun with that one. Yeah, exactly, Justin.
Yes.
Sorry.
The static peak.
But
It
Sorry.
piques your interest.
yeah, and I mean, and as far as that, it also reminds, the way I view it too is I do kind of see it as a lacuna, in the sense that the Books of Sorrow, we like in the game world, we recovered the calcified fragments, and then Ikora and Eris worked together to translate those so that we would be able to read them. The Books of Sorrow, which we will definitely talk about that a little bit, also themselves have potentially different translations and meanings.
Right. And when it's used in the Books of Sorrow, it's more of a kind of like a call. Like
Well,
a
I
battle
view it
cry.
as kind of,
It's not a battle.
yeah.
It's not
Like
a
an
battle.
invocation.
It's also kind of more like an amen, like an amen.
Right. Like I actually view it more like hallelujah, because amen
Right.
is
Okay.
very
Fair. Yeah. Well,
dismissive,
amen means I
or not
believe,
dismissive.
but yeah.
Right. But this one's more like an exclamation.
It's more of a
than anything.
celebratory statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. Yeah. But yeah.
Sure.
So, anyways, that was my little contribution to Lost Lore, and I'm gonna kind of give way to a conversation which I have been told repeatedly they could do an entire show on.
We could. I could do a whole show on this. I could. I think we should preface this though, that, and Beard, I know Justin's take on it, because Justin and I had a nice long conversation about this before the show even started, but would you say that we don't condone how this was released?
Not in the slightest.
But as far as Beard and I go, and I know Blue is a musician, and I know Justin plays as well. As a musician, the Music of the Spheres, which was released this week through a leak, illegally, by the way, not legal in any way, shape, or form. And I know there's a conspiracy out there that this is Bungie actually releasing it to kind of pacify the community. I don't necessarily believe that, considering that they've had this under wraps and could have used it many times. So
they could have profited off of it. They could have released it in some other realming. They could have had a big to-do or big release about it. They chose not to. They just leaked it after we'd been screaming for it for this long. Highly doubtful. Highly doubtful.
Right. But as far as the music itself goes, the music of the Spheres, which was written by Marty, what was his last name?
O'Donnell.
Marty O'Donnell, who, along with Michael Salvatore and Paul McCartney, is a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. It is 50 minutes long of some of the best classically written music I've heard in a long time.
Absolutely.
And I was forced to listen to a lot of classical music in college as a music teacher. So I could go into all sorts of lore about why it's so significant beyond just the fact that they're using a Lydian scale with a flat 7, which there's a whole bunch of lore that goes into that and music history that goes into why that's significant. It's used not only in the fact that each key for each of the pieces, each of the segments of this piece are within the scale, using C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, and B flat, and back to C, which would be the Lydian flat 7 scale. It's also using what's called a mystic chord, which is a chord based off of tritones.
Yes.
And that is a significant piece of music history because tritones was considered the devil's interval. It was actually banned for being written.
Yep.
And when it was initially started to be introduced, it was through the Russians who started introducing it. And particularly one in particular who was very mystic. And him and his other contemporary, Stravinsky, used it quite a bit. Now, most people, if you were music theater, you might know the tritone as the interval for the song Maria. Bum, ba-dum. That first deal, bum, bum. That is a tritone, the interval.
Yes.
It's used a lot in this piece, Music of the Spheres, which is very dissonant and unresolving. You don't know where it's going to go, which is leading you to feel like you can't actually get a resolution. A lot of music that we play has an obvious ending, and you can almost sing along to any song on the radio because there's no surprise. This piece of music leaves you guessing.
Boy, that sounds familiar.
All over the place. Anyway,
Yeah.
I could probably go on this for a long time, and I'm going to not because this gets into some of my background. And
well, I'm going to say, and it's really easy to do. Like easy to do with the knowledge behind it, I should say. Just the ideas that are kind of presented within the actual music pieces themselves does, like you said, it kind of ties back to the lore. It ties back to, the kind of stuff that we're seeing through even topical with today with like Books of Sorrow and everything. Everything kind of ties back to what the main theme was. Right. That it was that main theme was so tied together within the initial, either original or even some of the stuff that's left over here from our current version of Destiny, that just makes you go, okay, this was their plan, even down to the music. It all tied back to it, which I love.
Right.
I've on a slightly different note though have compared it to Gustav Holst's The Planets. And a lot of people are familiar with at least listening to Mars. One of my favorites, my absolute favorites out of the Music of the Spheres and Holtz was Jupiter. And both of them here, just absolutely excellent. Both pieces are different in their own right. They're made in different time periods where one is accepted by different methods of writing versus another, obviously. But this version of The Planets by Marty O'Donnell, Michael Salvatore, between the couple of them, between the entire studio, the significance behind writing it the way that they did was absolutely, to me, perfect. Mm-hmm. And besides the lines that are kind of taken from what Holtz had and placed into these pieces, it just harkens back to a different time of what they were either trying to do or what they were working to do. it all just it flows way too well, like way too freaking well.
So, fun fact.
Yeah.
Holst actually learned a lot of the stylistic stuff that was used in the planets from Stravinsky, who learned it from Scriabin, which is the name of the guy who originated the mystic chord.
Right.
And he was the one he and Stravinsky were kind of contemporaries of each other.
Mm-hmm.
But
I can't help but think that there wasn't significance in needing to like name all of them. I mean, they're noting, and granted, Destiny, and I've taken note of this as well throughout like a few different things that I've covered. Long story short, the solar system is the important feature, basically, of Destiny. Like, we're trying to take it all back. The solar system is what they are trying to otherwise denote and mark for us here within the music of the spheres. It's just I just hearkening back to the title and the name, hearkening back to the names that they have within the titles and everything. Like, it all ties in so well with what we know of Destiny. Calling the Rose Mars, the Ruin Venus. I've just got the titles of the songs here because I'm totally not listening to it right now. I don't know what you're talking about. The biggest thing, though, that always kind of like really screwed with my head, the initial what is it? The initial soundtrack that they had released. They always had these things like the excerpt from the Ecstasy, excerpts from the Path. I always thought that these were like little things to say, well, these were songs that like harken back to a different age within Destiny. And then I end up coming to find out that no, these were the titles of the original songs. So they were at least taking these bits and pieces and still implementing them into the game. I know that's been a hot button topic for some people, but I would argue and seriously come back to say that it still does respect what they were trying to put together. They're not throwing it out. They still wholly respect it, at least to some degree.
Right. And as far as the tie-in, it's not canon. It was never released with the game. It was never released by Bungie or Activision. So you can't necessarily consider it as canon. But as far as an sketchbook of the initial idea being pulled together, Blue, I posted that in chat the other day and you ignored it.
I was busy.
Sure you were. I knew you
during
would
the week.
dive into
During
this
the
topic.
week. Oh yeah,
he's busy for me a lot too.
Yeah. Well, that's a different kind of busy. What?
I thought this was a PG show.
Yowza. Speaking of hot button topics,
Anyway. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that we can extrapolate from the piece in and of itself. Listening to it, we could pull it into Destiny because yes, the themes are still in Destiny. There are very few motives, which are like little sound bites from the original piece that are not somewhere in the game, either in D1 or D2. It's still there. They're still using a lot of it, but the whole of Music of the Spheres in and of itself is not Destiny anymore. It's not canon. It's a good sketchbook to see what they used as far as the pulling everything together and getting an idea for what they want. And you can tell this piece is a labor of love.
Oh yeah.
I was telling this to Justin, is like when a composer for any sort of production is being pitched, they pitch ideas constantly to whoever is in charge. Because writing out a piece of music like this takes a long time. It's hours and hours and hours. And so you're not going to sit down with the entire piece and pitch it to them and then have them throw it away.
No.
So,
well, and you can almost hear that if I had to remember from not to jump in, sorry, Green, with the Black Garden. The thing that almost ticks me off is the union, because it is used during that last fight, almost in its entirety.
But it's so good.
It's so good, but it's like the only time you hear it and they don't include it on the main soundtrack, and it drives me nuts because I've been trying to like find that specific part again, and then you end up getting this one. But yeah, sorry.
My big point is with this, even though Activision did not go with it, that this is a piece that Marty wrote with a lot of love and a lot of intent for himself.
Yes.
He finished this for himself. It wasn't necessarily for Destiny. It wasn't necessarily for Bungie. It was for him to finish. And yes, he was part of the studio at the time. And when Bungie decided not to go with it, which is their total prerogative, Activision and Bungie, it's their prerogative to get away from it. But, yeah, you're fine, Blue. Blue's like apologizing to me, which is kind of a nice thing and nice change. But
what's that feel like?
It's I can't describe
I have so many
it.
words,
it's like,
but I don't have enough beeps. I don't have enough beeps in the.
You're living the dream, Green.
It's like umami, kind of like it's undescribable, but it's awesome at the same time. Anyway,
Hey. But
yeah, that's the biggest I think shame of it in a way. Is just because they like Music of the Spheres. The problem is that it wasn't like it was partially released to us because we had the concert that I think played over most of it. We knew that it existed from a number of different avenues, but of course we never had the chance to actually listen to it. There's plenty of other soundtracks that are out there that we will never, ever in our lifetime be able to listen to because they are held behind some other kind of embargo. Music of the Spheres is just a really weird case, and I don't hold that against absolute anybody when it comes to either release or anything like that. Like, again, and I'm not going to say, go listen to it, but it's solely out there. Just, you could find it. But you should probably not listen to it at all, like I'm doing right now.
The big thing is stealing music because it's behind a thing is still not right.
No.
As far as a musician and a composer and an orchestrator, from an orchestrator's perspective,
yes,
I've written things that I no longer have access to because I don't own them anymore.
Yes. And
it sucks. But it's also part of the reality of the contract that you sign with the people that you orchestrate for or write for. And so stealing that music back, even though you put a lot of time and love into it, it's still not okay.
No.
No, and if it's not your music,
right?
Like you have zero say as to what is its fate. Like, I've written things before that I don't want anyone to hear.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be cool, no matter how passionate someone was about, if anyone would be, like if anyone ever was hypothetically passionate about that piece of music, it wouldn't be right for them to overstep their bounds as a consumer,
right?
And disseminate that. Like, that's crossing a line.
Yeah, not everybody has the right to say, well, I love this, everybody else will too. That's up to the artist in terms of releasing.
Yeah.
So
and in this case, it gets a little bit murkier because it's not quite all up to the artist, because the artist is an employee of a studio, and the studio it gets really convoluted really quickly.
It does.
But I think the best way to proceed from the whole thing is to just say, well, it's out. It's it is what it is. And
there.
And Marty O'Donnell made it, so it's going to be amazing. So
it's like,
I'm going to say it's there. It's a thing. It's wonderful. Enjoy it while we can. However many of us get in trouble for it, go from there.
Right. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. If you want to talk more about the music theory behind it, or like the history of stuff, I'm sure you could find me in Discord. And I would be glad to talk to you about it because I love this stuff.
Careful, she'll write you a book, just like I do, for everything.
There's already books about the music of the spheres.
That's true.
Yes, there's a whole philosophy tied into it.
Yeah, it's like it's 200 or 300 years old or something like that.
You silly person who killed people who disagreed with you. What?
Did you know the tritone is?
Yeah.
Never mind. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's evil.
We're not gonna talk about it.
Nope.
Well, just imagine we did.
So metal.
So those books of Sparrow.
Metal.
Books of Sparrow.
Sparrow?
Sparrow.
Sparrow. Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
I love Sparrows. Their pizza's amazing.
I disagree, but that's okay.
I mean, it's pizza. I'll go for pizza at any time. Anyway,
The books of Sparrow. Are they Latin or un-Latin? Are they European or African?
Can we just say
what is the average wing beat?
It is more than one book of one sorrow. Books.
So are they all carrying one coconut? No? Okay. Anyways.
I opened my mouth to say something and I had no idea what I was going to say, but I immediately shut it.
The books of Sparrow. The books of Sparrow. We just went to Doctor Who.
It's like a really tacky joke, I know. This is what I thought of when you said that, but no.
Yeah.
And I will tell it in post-stream. So
Yeah.
What is your favorite color?
That's just going places we shouldn't go.
All right. Anyways. Oh, man. All right. So real quick, the books of sorrow are basically, I would argue, to give a quick summary, are basically the scripture of the hive. Specifically, and we're going to get into this a little bit more next week, but this is specifically for Oryx's bloodline. And we'll like I said, we're gonna definitely talk about that next week when we talk about the siblings. But to kind of take a step back and see kind of the approach that I guess I take when I look at the books of sorrow. You have to understand, when I say scripture, what I mean is basically a good definition to kind of approach that word with is a text which religious traditions consider to be central to their practice or beliefs. So religious texts may be used to provide meaning and purpose, invoke a deeper connection with the divine, convey religious truths, promote religious experiences, foster communal identity, and guide individual and communal religious practice. Religious texts often communicate the practices or values of religious traditions, and they can be looked at too as a set of guiding principles which dictate physical, mental, spiritual, or historical elements considered important to a specific religion. Most organized religions out there are going, actually, I'm going to argue all organized religions, because this would be a guiding tenet of an organized religion, are going to have scripture. It is most predominantly known in the Christian faith as the Bible. You have the Quran, you have the Torah, just take your pick of an organized religion. They will have a scripture. It is not specific to any particular religion at all. It is a general term. So when I say that it is a scripture of the hive, that is approaching the hive in the view of the hive as a religious community. And this is and some of you follow me on Twitter. This is where I'm like, I get a little nervous, because I tend to see things, and you guys, most of I tend to look at things from like a historical trivia point of view. And when I read the books of sorrow, I really read a transcript and a historical recounting of a crusade or a holy war of conversion of the universe. And this, again, is a touchy subject. It is a touchy subject in general. And again, regardless of what religion you come from, there is going to be controversial issues in the history of that religion when it comes to holy wars, simply because it enters into the argument of a justification for violence. So I actually have started to put together an article that I'm hoping to finish somewhat soon, about sword logic and about the connections to religious warfare within Destiny, and kind of how that is an interesting controversy for our purposes. But the biggest thing that seems to connect to me is usually in the Books of Sorrow is really, why are they important? What is the importance of the Books of Sorrow from an in-game perspective, not from an out-of-game perspective, because we can talk about the out-of-game, how it educates us as the Hive. It makes them a more approachable villain. It makes Oryx more
relatable.
Tragic, relatable. And so, but I mean, from like an in-game perspective, what is the importance of our characters gaining access to these books? And Green, I know you wanted to jump in on before I go too far down that rabbit hole.
Well, I mean, if you look at the books by verses, each verse tends to have one type of campaign in one shape or form, whether it's conquering a whole race, or it's the gaining of knowledge, or it's the conquering of a different race, or the war between the Vex and the Hive. I mean, each verse kind of has its own war arc built into it.
Almost like an individual crusade.
Almost. Anyway.
Well, and so like
into your point earlier.
right. No, and one of the the prominent example of this is, and this is gonna, for me, this keeps coming back to the concept of sword logic. I think sword logic is extremely important in the universe of Destiny, mostly because at its core, it's next to impossible to dispute. It's a very simple, it's a very stark, it's a very brutal understanding of the purpose of existence. And regardless of how you feel about that, the way that philosophically and socially they have built up this understanding in the religious connotations of the Hive with regards to the logic of the sword, it is arguably literally impossible to dispute this argument. Because it is at its base so simple. Either it's the might is right argument. You see this a lot in a lot of cultures that are very militaristic. You had a lot of instances of even Rome. Rome is one of the best examples of this, early Rome, where iron sharpens iron, and you had this hyper competitive environment in which the mightiest rose to the top, and they stayed at the top by making sure that they were always the strongest. And the instant that they weren't the strongest, they were defeated. And therefore, this entire philosophy pretty much reinforced itself in that community. Ultimately, as anyone who pays attention to or any form of history, Rome isn't what it was. Ultimately, it falls in on itself. And there's a whole host of reasons why it falls in on itself. But the way Oryx describes in the Books of Sorrow the entire concept of the logic of the sword, of the pursuit of the final shape, the problem really resides in the fact that in order to prove him wrong, you have to prove him right. That is the entire kind of paradox that is in the entire Touch of Malice quest. Is that the construction of the Touch of Malice, which is the exotic quest in which you are required to gather the calcified fragments in Destiny 1. In order to get that, you learn that arguably you are immortalizing Oryx through the creation of this weapon, because throughout the Books of Sorrow and at the conclusion of the Books of Sorrow, he makes the point that in order to be disproven, you have to overpower him, which proves him right. Like there's this brutal like binary thing that is underlying all this logic in the sword logic and inside the Books of Sorrow that again it's very difficult to disprove, and I haven't quite figured out if it's even possible to disprove it, because it's a very, very simplistic philosophy, which is actually its strength.
Well, it's a universal philosophy. It's a very large universal philosophy.
Mm-hmm, right.
Just, how many people have come up with it in some way, shape, or form?
Darwin?
I'm gonna say Darwin's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, and it's
the
a
strong
hyper
will conquer the weak,
right? And it's hyper Darwinistic, like
hyper.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of when in the episode that we have about the sword logic, which was episode 47. Damo and I go back and forth about this all the time, because the thing is, Darwinism is not wrong. It's just not completely correct either. It doesn't take into account some things. From a
completely natural standpoint, not thinking emotional, not thinking philosophical, Darwinism in a lot of ways is right.
Yes, but
if you include the emotional thought and the philosophical thinking of humanity,
yes,
exactly, it adds problems.
Yes, so and that's where sword logic starts to kind of get really. I hate to use the word fuzzy, but it kind of starts getting fuzzy because the minute sword logic at its core is the idea that might is right. Right. It really it's a total, and Oryx and the Hive kind of have a almost argue that they even have a perverted idea of the logic of the sword, because they view, Oryx especially views it as total violence, total aggression, total offensive. You see this within the Taken Knight Grimoire card. Where he said, and this is actually out of the thing that I'm putting together, but I basically say the starkness and simplicity is visible in the embracing of total violence. Yet even the Hive actually find this difficult, which to me is actually really, really intriguing. Even the Hive, who have been literally bred to follow this mentality, find this concept hard to accept.
Right, but they weren't initially along the lines of this concept. In some respects, because they were on the other side of the coin.
Well, with
the Temple Truth, and I'm not thinking Hive I'm thinking proto Hive.
Right. And I would argue that so the card that I'm talking about, the Taken Knight, the knights that he's talking to when he takes, so the quote is, "You fear death, even as you visit nothingness on your foes, even as you gather tribute from your acolytes, you know that one day your strength will be outmatched, and your centuries of slaughter will end. So you practice your guard. You call up walls to protect you. You betray the sword logic. You compromise the totality of your violence. Why protect your ground when you can take the enemies?" And that's the end of the quote. Excuse me. But my point here is, I agree 100% with you, Green. However, the argument that I would have is that the Hive that he is speaking to within these fragments and these cards, they're not proto. Arguably, the only proto Hive that exist are Oryx, Savathun, and Xivu.
And even at that point, they're not proto Hive anymore.
Correct, but I mean, the only creatures in existence right now, and arguably Tau, but we don't know. I can't really include her in this because we don't know what her status is. But the thing is that early in the Books of Sorrow, we see the conversion of the entirety of the Krill people, as well as 2% of Fundament.
Not necessarily the entirety.
Well, true. That
survived because
there was a rebellion against. So there were some Krill that rebelled. But the other kind of thing that you see also within the Hive is a drastic extension of life through an unnatural and abominable means. In the Books of Sorrow, at the beginning, we've learned that the Krill have very short lifespans. It's one of the contention facts that lead to the Faustian bargain, if you will, with the worm gods. Is they're like, we don't have enough time to do the stuff that we need to do, which is it's a very relatable issue to humanity in general. Anybody who's mortal understands this kind of it's called a midlife crisis, basically. You realize that you're not going to be able to do all the things that you want to do, or all the things that you quote unquote need to do. And so that enters into this idea of a Faustian bargain, a deal with the devil. which is exactly what happens. And you see that with the oath that they take with the worm gods. And they imbibe the worms, and they basically come into communion, literally, with the worm gods. And then they're basically charged. They're told to take this gift and share it. And they are literally told if their gift is refused, to kill them. It literally is a holy war against the races of Fundament. And Fundament.
Against multiple races, not just Fundament races.
Well, right. Well, at first, which actually kind of, this is a really big rabbit hole, because this also introduces a really intriguing aspect of sword logic. Sword logic. So it gets into the concept of a magical environment of a hermeneutics. And this is kind of like this also starts looking at like the hypocrisy of the worm gods a little bit. But basically you see this in verse 2. Verse 2.0 is when the holy war of the Fundament begins. And then verse 2.1, we see that 2% of Fundament has fallen to the hive. This is where the slaughter at Kaharn Atoll happens. And Kaharn Atoll, oh, sorry, real quick, there are 511 species on Fundament. So it's a very big, it's a big planet. So 2% of those.
Saturn.
It is.
That's just
not Saturn, but
right, but it's similar to Saturn.
Yes, it's similar to Saturn. Yes. Sorry.
Yes, how many moons are around there, right. Definitely. But they're also Uranus would fit that same bill.
Right.
Silly as that is, but Saturn fits the most. Same with Jupiter. Jupiter also fits that same bill.
Right. It's just the fact that Saturn also has 53 moons around.
Actually, so does Jupiter. Jupiter fits in 52. Mm-hmm. So if the argument is the traveler's not there, it would have been Jupiter, yo.
Oh my! Anyway,
oh my! Carrying on. I'm sorry. I hear space. I gotta talk about space.
No,
me too.
That's why I have you guys here. My point actually is that the slaughter at Kaharn actually presents this interesting aspect of sword logic in that they gain power. Okay, let me. So. I don't know, or Beard, I'm assuming you're familiar with Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh yes.
Green, are you familiar with?
Not so much.
Okay, but are you familiar? Are you like familiar on a basic level of Full Metal?
I know what it is.
Okay,
Justin kind of knows.
Justin, you're kind of. There is a reason I'm pulling this anime in, because there is actually a foundational truth to the anime that is actually applicable in other things. And it's basically the law of equivalent exchange. It basically, you cannot create, it's conservation of energy. You can't create stuff. You can just convert it from one state to another.
Right.
This presents the argument that in my mind solidifies the idea that everyone has light. Everyone has light, because the one thing that the hive crave is light. That's what they feast on. That's how they gain their immortality.
We have in Grimoire explanation of that as well.
Correct.
When Arash talks about the helium drinkers and describes them as those who follow the light, or those that are full of light, or however she describes them. She considers them opposite. But they are the same race, because later on in that card she talks about how they're from likely the same event.
Yes.
That leads them
and
to
there's also the disturbing fact that they eat the children of each other's courts.
Right.
Which is a fun fact, because apparently that's how you pay tribute. But
they also refer to the Ammonite as the wielders of the light.
Yeah, and the Ammonites also have paracausal capabilities.
Yes.
And they're squids. Or cephalopods.
They have 6 arms.
They're cephalopods.
They have 6 arms.
I'm not even going to start down the spinfoil rabbit hole that creates with regards to the Vex.
Hi, Ponin. What?
Yeah, exactly. Why was someone obsessed with cephalopods?
Kim Bean.
Also, don't get me started on my theories behind that because I already have. Oh, wait, never mind. Too late.
Oh, pancake.
Hey,
Anyways,
by the way, you're listening to this. It's probably too late, but I think we should record our Spinfoil episode that we're.
Yes, we will. I already have plans on doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Look
anyway,
forward to that Spinfoil episode.
yes, no, yeah, it's going to be a fun one. To go back, what this actually presents is a really interesting concept of sword logic as being a degree of almost alchemical hermeneutics, and this is because it is only because of the slaughter at a Kaharn Atoll that they gain the logic that is necessary to break geostationary orbit. They have to kill that many people or that many entities and take that much light in order to power the rituals that will then allow them to make a wound to leave the planet. That is literally what happens that's the importance of Kaharn. It is at that point that Xivu's battle allows Savathun's needle ships to make a wound because they have now enough power. The entire thing is basically blood magic in regards to using life force to power this thing.
Take out. Now, if you're worried about like how does that even work, take out magic or the mysticism in it, and substitute science in, and if another like entity steals a bunch of scientific research by conquering a society, they're going to gain more capabilities. Right.
Well, and okay, sorry. Yeah, Green, that's an excellent point. That actually you are correct. I use the word hermeneutic alchemy because technically in the rawest sense of those words, those aren't actually meant to be 100% magical. They are a form of what's called theurgy. And theurgy is what's basically identified as the practice of rituals that sometimes seem magical in nature, but are performed with the intention of invoking the action or evoking the presence of one or more gods, especially with the goal of achieving what's called herosis, which is unity with the divine, and perfecting oneself. You see this within Hermeticism, which had a number. This is again a big rabbit hole. Really quick, Hermeticism is a collection of doctrines that are characterized by a resistance to the dominance of either pure rationality or doctrinal faith. So it's actually a synthesizing of the two into a sense of you can't explain everything through 100% rationale or everything through faith alone. Like you combine the two. And you see this in the early forms of our own, and this is in real world, our own culture within the medieval worlds where you have alchemists and, your theologist and stuff like that. That is actually where it is. It's called synchronistic and intellectualized pagan thought. It's predominantly in the 3rd and 7th century AD. That's 3rd to 7th century AD is actually identified as what's called the Renaissance of synchronistic and intellectual pagan thought, as seen through Hermeticism. Sorry, and synchronistic. When I say that, sorry, there's a lot of these like random words. Synchronistic thought is basically the combining of different beliefs which blend different practices of various schools of thought that involves merging or assimilating several originally discrete traditions, which basically gives the idea that there is an underlying unifying theme within them. And it basically blends all these and allows for the inclusion of a multitude of faiths and really kind of evens the playing field. And this is predominantly through... You see this predominantly through a lot of that research. So there, and again, like I said, large rabbit hole. I'm going to try, and that's me trying to summarize centuries of information on hermeneutic thought as far as the relation to the dark theurgy that I see within the hive magic. But that's all from Kaharn. That's it. Like, I mean, that's from one fragment.
Right.
And I'm gonna let Green talk now.
Yeah. Fair warning, as far as looking into Hermetic thought, if you want to research it more, you're going to find that a lot of the stuff that is on it, if you kind of dive outside of the realm of philosophy, you're going to find a lot of mysticism thrown in with it, and there's been kind of a revival of it, a pseudo revival within the last 20 years. Book of Secret, or not Book of Secrets, The Secret. It is a book called The Secret, was one that kind of pushed that idea, the law of attraction, and kind of mysticism.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just
no worries. Yeah, no worries. It kind of pulls that in a little bit more in a less what most people would consider paganistic type style. Mission boards and stuff like that, but it's still using that same principle. Anyway, that's one card.
Right, yeah, sorry. And just to kind of back up a little bit as well, fair warning, if you do start looking into hermeneutics and, you know, hermeticism and theurgy, go into it with the awareness that it transcends into darker things somewhat quickly.
As well.
And so this is just me kind of being like, don't go into it thinking that it's just going to be academic stuff, because it's not. It's the nature of this type of blending of the supernatural and the rational. There are some aspects which might make normal people, I guess, or most people uncomfortable. And that is not the aspect of what I'm talking about here. I'm actually kind of referring to the philosophical side of it. I'm more than happy. I mean, the ritualistic kind of it's embedded in the philosophical, but if you just focus, like if you don't stay on the philosophical side, you can get drawn into a very dark place, is what I'm saying. If you start following the ritualistic for the ritualistic, there's some dangerous things that you can find, and it's just uncomfortable things is also really what it is. But I'm more than happy to chat with anybody about it. So
just go into it being aware.
Yes, exactly.
Justin? Garth Brooks of Sorrow. When did that happen?
He did warn us, to be fair, that he was going to change his name in the middle of the podcast.
Man.
I think he's ignored. He didn't push to hear, so he can't hear us. He is.
There's a myriad of menus to go through to do this push to talk thing you want. I think also, the point I wanted to make was, we assign rituals to things. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's a tangible effect of said ritual upon, in terms of cause and effect. And we don't really, the Hive live in a world where their will and their execution of this logic, this sword logic, actually exerts a physical force upon things. In the world we're most acquainted with, our logic is nothing more than a thought exercise. That it's more a symptom of what physically happens in the world, as opposed to being a root cause of things happening. Whereas in the hive world, the logic in and of itself is a physical force. And I just wanted to you can assign ritual to it, but whether or not that ritual is what's actually empowering the physical forces to move in their world, or whether it's the logic that is the underpinning physical law in their universe, is yet to be seen.
The one thing that I've always kind of attributed this to is the idea of kind of creating your own reality by you can wish something so much. You see this with the placebo effect. You think it's going to work, you believe it's going to work. If you are one of the candidates that doesn't actually have whatever the real medicine and you have the placebo, you can create that own reality in some respects. It's somewhat similar. There's not necessarily mysticism brought about by it. It's more of you're working towards it. You are making it happen, even if you don't realize you're making it happen, because you're taking steps to make it happen. But that is my mysticism take on it.
Yeah. But the hive seem to transcend psychosomaticism. So like that's almost the whole sugar pill fallacy is an instance of your neural network in your brain making something real for you, because what you experience is down to a set of bioelectric signals that are being experienced by you. But how do you experience them? You experience them with bioelectric receptors and your whole neurological system. So that can be faked out and lied to. What can't be faked out and lied to is third-party perception and observation of physical forces by an unbiased third party, the third man. Like that's where the hives start to go into. Yeah, you like that. I know you like that. That's where.
That's for you, Blue.
That was for Blue. That's where the hives start to go into La La Land, or that's where it starts to make a very real break from what we have experienced as being possible. But yeah, that's a very good point about the placebo effect.
Now, here's a question: does the route that the hive take make them evil or not evil? Because are they just a product of their environment and other influences? Because it's not just environment, it's other influences because of that stupid dried up little anyway. Or are they actually, do they have a source of evil within them?
Oh, where's Dama?
Oh, I'm getting yelled at in chat. This is weird.
I'm going to say my piece and I'm going to be quiet. For something to be evil, it has to know that what it's doing is in contradiction with good moral standing, and it has to know that what it's doing is wrong. A shark can't be evil because a shark has no idea. It has no concept of right or wrong.
What? Okay, so
we gonna fight. We gonna fight.
I'm gonna play.
Fight.
But real quick before we fight,
yes,
take a moment real quick.
Yeah. Do it.
Green's so proud of me. I remembered to do it this time.
You did.
Real quick. Yeah. Real quick, I wanted to just take a moment to give a big shout out to the Loot Crate, who is actually sponsoring this episode. So as a part of Focus Fire Chat community, you might have noticed that we all have a tendency to have a bit of an obsession with basically all kinds of geek gear. We even have a channel dedicated to that. And so as a part of the community, the Focus Fire Chat team would like to offer you a chance to experience that kind of adrenaline rush, that rush of getting a goodie package yourself, by offering you 10% off any new subscription to Loot Crate. All you have to do is visit www.trylootcrate.com/FFC and then enter the promo code BRIDGE10 and you'll get immediately 10% savings off that new subscription. And that is a monthly subscription package. I don't actually know. I don't remember if I've seen the January theme just yet, but I know that.
Either.
Have you?
No, I have not.
Okay. I know that
I was just thinking I wore my Harry Potter
one,
socks.
Oh, the Harry Potter site? Yeah. The recent Destiny one apparently had amazing content in it, so definitely keep a lookout for that as well. They do a lot of video game stuff. They actually have an entire loot box dedicated to video games. That is pretty phenomenal. But okay, so Garth Brooks is over here yelling at me about the relativism of good and evil.
Okay, so where did we leave at? Where did we leave off?
The hive are sharks. The hive are sharks.
Okay, so morality.
Shark missile.
Morality is dependent. Shark missile. Wait,
why did we bring Dragon's Breath into this?
Oh, I missed that gun. So, is morality dependent on the context of the social standing of the item, person, animal, being? Is morality the same across all boards, or is it dependent on where you're at and who you are?
I think everyone should get equal time with this one, so I'm going to yield the floor to the congressman from Kansas, Mr. Blue Crew.
Hey, so by your argument, and Psychotics already picked up on this, by your argument, though, snakes are not evil.
For me? By my argument?
I generally...
No, Justin's argument.
I can explain this away. I will still... I don't want you to waste your time with this. I want you to go with your own thing. So,
I would just like to state that doesn't surprise me in the least that you could explain away the difference. I would just like to explain that now.
I would like to know how he's going to explain away the difference, because this gets to the heart of the matter.
I would too, because realistically, I think that's going to cover every different way that this goes about it. Mm-hmm. So you know what, Justin,
go.
Open your mouth, go for it, unhinge your jaw, and speak to us.
Oh, that is a bad image.
That was a good one, Boo Boo.
Hey, you're very welcome there.
That was a call to the cuckoo.
Bad image.
Hey, I hear the ranger coming. We better run.
Okay, so objectively, I do acknowledge that snakes, with their mental capacity, are incapable of evil. That's me being objective and rational. And this is, you caught me at a rare moment. But
thank God it's recorded.
Yes. They see, this is where objectivity and subjectivity become everything gets blurred. Okay, because snakes are 100% capable of acts that without the gift that is objectivity are completely 100% able to be classified as evil. A snake bites a little baby kitten in the face and the kitten dies. Like, how could you possibly not look at that snake and say, you are so evil? But the snake is not capable of being immoral, which, there's a lot of different definitions of the word evil, but when I define evil, or it is what it is for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, everybody defines evil a little bit different, but for me, it all comes down to immoral. And if the being perpetrating the subjective evil act is incapable of a moral system, then that being can't be evil. So, like I said, a shark is incapable of being evil. Like a shark, chewing up some poor little surfers. That's not evil. That's nature. Like that's That's base instinct working. That's hunter. So you can say that at one point the hive did have morals. They had a moral code which they adhered to, but all that got thrown by the wayside when they took on the worm pact. So they essentially installed a tool that reinforced their base instinct of survival. So at that point, everything about their actions became an issue not of morality anymore, or whether I should do this or whether I shouldn't do this, or whether this would be, bad or good. It became a matter of I do this, I live. I don't do this, I die. I kill this, I live. I don't kill this, I die. So we've actually reduced a sentient race, a race capable of higher thought, down to a base level of survivalism. And in that reduction, we've kind of removed morality from the argument. And the hive, as we meet them in D1 vanilla, when they all come rushing out of the hallway, which is, by the way, one of my favorite parts of a video game ever, because I did not expect it, is what we have done there is we've taken morality out of the equation. So I mean, unless you guys define evil differently than I do, the hive are not evil because by their own standards, by their own morals, they are not doing anything wrong. They're following the laws of nature.
Okay, so we got there. We got.
Sorry about that.
No. We got to where I was wanting to kind of get your opinion on the fact that the hive were ramped up to essentially the nature version of themselves. They're following their own nature to their own detriment at this point. I'm speaking primarily of the three: Oryx, Zavathun, and Zivu. Their worms are making them be hyper their own nature. So evil in and of itself is kind of it's a perspective sense, right? Everything that is perceived as evil is perceived by evil in one stance, and it's perceived as not necessarily evil by another based off of their own situation and nature and whatnot. The hive commit somewhat evil acts with how they interact with us, but the hive themselves are not evil. I do not think. They made some poor judgments, but they're kind of tied into their own deal. They're tied into their own stigma and path, unfortunately, now, thanks to Sathona originally kind of listening to a dry, rotted old worm that is really messed up. But I don't think necessarily that they're evil in and of themselves. They're just following their own path, even though their own path is really messed up and ends up with the annihilation of the universe and making everything nil. Okay, Blue, your turn.
All right. Where to start?
Beginning.
Yeah, I know. This goes back into
verse 1:1.
Yeah, verse 1:1. Let's start at the beginning. No, I think the biggest thing to me when it comes to the question of if the hive as a general species is evil is, first off, I'm going to state as a generalization, I really argue, or I really feel that you can't stereotype an entire race.
Right.
It's very difficult.
Considering you don't know the motivations of the entire race.
Right. And there is a degree of what Justin, I think, is arguing as far as the current state of the hive in their symbiotic form. there, and the reason why is a lot of there's a lot of impact within the diffusion of responsibility. You know, anyone who knows any basic sociological studies or psychological studies of like Milgram, for example, will probably recognize this. This is very similar to what was seen within Nazi Germany, as far as like following the orders of the leader. It begs the question of, do the people who follow the orders, are they morally responsible for their actions? And to a degree, I would argue, yes, they are, but there's also a degree of also the survival of the individual within that society that you have to take into context. There's the problem that I have ultimately with the hive is that from what we've seen so far, the argument that a creature can't be evil if it is just following its baser instincts, I have a large issue with. Because when you say something's not evil, that also then begs the question of, can you punish it for immoral acts or malevolent acts?
Is a malevolent act only malevolent because of the perspective of the person who it is against?
Does it matter?
I think it does.
If harm is done, harm is done.
Harm is done to a specific race or anything like that. Is it harm if it's for the nourishment of the other race? Is that a malevolent act? It's the shark argument again.
It is. The difference here is that a shark doesn't have a higher degree of sentience that the hive does. And the hive we have seen repeated members of the hive argue and debate with themselves whether or not the sword logic is the one true path.
Right.
The difference here is like, do I believe, so I agree 100% with Justin's interpretation of animalistic. I really hesitate to even call it violence, though there's not really a good term for it. But animal violence towards even other animals, to a large degree, I mean, taking abnormalities out of the picture, like the manhunters and stuff like that, generally speaking, there is a reason for any attack that an animal performs.
Right.
You see that a lot with dogs and even horses, which are the two animals that I'm very familiar with because I grew up basically training those for shows, and I also grew up on a ranch, so we had a lot of those animals around us. And there was never a time in which we had an animal that just went out of it. I mean, except for copperheads, but they're abnormalities. We never really had animals that would like... Yeah, copperheads just need to be killed on site.
It's still out of defense while they strike.
Having a copperhead come across a pasture to chase after you, I beg to differ. But that's
gross.
Yeah, no. Copperheads are the one snake that I will agree with you on. Snakes are evil assessment, Justin, because I've just
Evil.
But dogs, they're not evil, but they're hyper aggressive is what they are.
They're the ultimate sneaky snack because they warn you.
Yeah,
not.
because copperheads look like sticks, and they're really good at that game. They're really good at hide and seek.
Until it's time to bite you.
They're really good at hide and seek. But like dogs, take dogs for example. For a large percentage, and you'll quickly pick up on this if you ever talk to my brother about pit bulls. A large percentage of dogs actually they're not violent by nature. They really aren't. There are particular dogs that have been trained to be hyper violent. There are particular breeds that are more inclined to be violent, but that is artificially imposed on them.
Enhanced.
Yeah. And so, but like we had growing up, we had a lot of dogs that by society definition should not be safe to have around kids, and they were the friendliest dogs that we had. Like, they were the most protective of us, and so what we've seen a lot, just as for our personal experience, is that if you treat animals on a level that the animal understands what's going on, they're not going to be violent to you. There is no unprovoked violence as far as an animal is concerned. There is always a reason for that violence. And that is at its core, you can't say that an attack in that nature, if you corner an animal and it attacks you and it, mauls you, you can't say that that's an evil action on the animal's part.
Right.
However, if you corner a human being, that's where it gets a little bit dicier, because there's the degree of sense of forethought and the sense of the idea of, if I do this, it's the argument of like, self-defense is one thing, but at what point does self-defense become too much?
Are you talking about from the perspective of the person being cornered?
Yes.
I would argue still that the person being cornered, if the real threat of being cornered is not something they're familiar with, children, for example, who are not used to other people, other strangers cornering them, I think they have every right to fight back against.
Oh no! Fight back, yes. I am. Please, okay. Let me clear the air real quick. If you corner someone, yes, it is a threat. My point here is that, okay, so there, and understandably, there's a huge difference between myself and my 4-year-old. Yes, if this makes me super uncomfortable, but if someone were to corner him, I've told him, you fight with every ounce of your strength. Like you bite, claw, kick, you do whatever you need to get away from that situation. But that is an inherently different situation than, let's say, if I were to be cornered, because
at the same time, let me keep going with this. Then I'm not saying a physical reaction. If you are cornered by somebody and they have kind of a threat and an intent, you are immediately going to start analyzing the situation to figure out whether or not it is a threat. And if it is, figure out a way to get out of it.
Correct. And that's my point, though. That's my point. An animal doesn't have that self-awareness. An animal has a fight or flight. It's pure fight or flight. Humans have, and when I say humans, Sentience. I mean a highly cognitive creature. There are animals who have this capability as well. A lot of apes will have this capability. So I don't mean that in a speciesist way at all. If you have that ability to identify and analyze the situation in that nature, then you are capable of performing evil acts. It doesn't matter if you were never. It removes the argument that. Yeah, no. Go for it.
Well, okay, so yes, evil. My definition of evil acts is a premeditated thing without provocation. If there's provocation, it's a defense. It's a reaction. Much
Correct.
Thinking like the hive when it comes to the initial response to Heox or Teo or however you want to pronounce it.
Yes. That entire scenario, and the hive siblings are entirely tragic characters.
Right.
Like they were entities that were
classically
placed
tragic.
Yes, exactly. They were put into a classical. They were cornered. They were put into a situation that they were not prepared to handle, and they made a deal that they were not, fully aware of the implication. I mean, like the worm gods played them like a fiddle,
right? And they continue to play them like a fiddle,
right? But that doesn't negate the fact that.
Doesn't it?
Yes. No, it doesn't, because there is an instant at which Oryx and the siblings made the choice to come back to the darkness. There is a point that Arash walked away, and she could have died, but she chose to continue doing evil acts to suck the life force out of victims in order for her to continue living. She chose her own existence over the existence of others.
Okay. At that point, yes, I would agree.
That point, and that's where I'm like, that's where I find it's tough, because up until that point, I'm like, I can be on the fence as far as like, were they truly evil or not? I'm like, it goes back into like this, like, does the soldier who follow orders, is that truly evil? I mean, yes, technically, but given that we don't know the full context, there's plenty of variables involved in that moral equation. I'm like, I'm not. But the minute that Orash walked away, and then Savathun is tasked to bring her back, and she comes back willingly to the point that later down the cycle in the Books of Sorrow, she then convinces Savathun that, because then there's a later point that Savathun doubts and says, I don't know if this is the truth, and blah, blah, blah. And that's where Oryx gives Savathun Coria, and then also says the really, really awesome definition that basically, we're the proof, we the hive. If we last forever, we prove it. And if something more ruthless conquers us, then the proof is sealed. So, like,
Justin has a really good point in chat. Justin?
The survival imperative. The argument I have against survival imperative is, I recognize that. And if we were talking about just animals, yes, that would be enough. We are not talking about just animals. We're talking about,
there are humans will do anything to survive as well.
Well,
as uncomfortable as many people as might yell at me for this, I'm going to still say, if you will do anything to live, and you choose to do something that grossly harms another human being, it's the question of, do you push the red button if it's a choice between pushing the red button to kill someone else or kill yourself or have yourself die. If you choose to kill someone else, that death is still on you. You are still responsible for that person's death.
But is that following the survival instinct at that point? Is it just the animalistic side of it?
The point of
having a sacrifice, or creating a self-sacrifice for the betterment of another, is that what makes something evil?
All right, let me take a step back real quick before I continue. This is entirely based on my personal beliefs. So, like, obviously, I just want to make sure I'm like coming at this.
We've had this talk before.
Yeah, we've had this. I know Justin and I have had this talk before too. If you disagree with me, and this is actually, I know Green Beard Justin, that's what we're doing right now. But I'm talking to people listening. If you disagree with me, please, I'm not belittling that. I don't mean to belittle that at all. Actually, I want to hear it, because that's the point of a debate, is to hear opposing sides. And Green is doing an amazing job playing devil's advocate, and I really appreciate it. Even though she's being a little bullheaded, but that's the point of devil's advocate. That's the point of devil's advocate, is that's the point. Morality is a very slippery conversation, because it is a very subjective conversation.
Yes, please.
It is. Right? I mean, can we all agree to that? Your definition of there is no black and white in morality.
That's where I want to go with it. That's where I want to go with it.
Your Heinlein quote.
Do it, Justin.
Well, the Heinlein quote is, I never learned much from a man I constantly agreed with.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. You know who we haven't heard from on this yet? And I'm curious to hear his perspective. Because I know Blue, we could debate.
Oh, yeah,
this
we'll go back and forth forever. So, yeah, let him weigh in on this one.
Beard?
So, inherently, I'm hearing a lot of, like, back and forth, basically, with, like, animals and whatnot. And it's not, like, just with this chat. It's constant. With a good majority of what basically comes of, are the hive evil? Are the hive a little bit more inherently discursive, if that is even a word? It makes sense in my head. The idea, effectively, that they only carry out evil thoughts, or that they are inherently evil. I don't necessarily think that is the case, and you guys were kind of pushing on a little bit of that point that I was going to bring up. They are, as we see throughout the Books of Sorrow, there are more species that have cognitive thought than, of course, just humanity and just the hive. And per that existence, that means that there are others that kind of fall within that same ground. So overall, if I were to just make it as a summated thought, no, I don't believe that the Hive are inherently evil. Overall, do I think that there is a shred in them that has kind of turned that way? I think it was more of a turn that way more than anything else. It was their actions forced them to become a bit darker. I think that's the best way that I can kind of explain it or put it. The base nature of the protohive, especially the protohive, have the idea is that yes, they want to live on for further time, and that's where they're even pushed into this corner. Teox, Tao, however you want to pronounce it, like Green said earlier, it's a question of that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and at least for that subsect of Hive. But in terms of how the Hive or even the other species had acted on Fundament in general, it was more of a need of survival than it was anything else. And now they had this act that they could go ahead and get out of it, even if, as stated before, a little misconstrued or a little misguided. That's at least overall kind of my thoughts on it without really dipping into it. Again, there are several other species that do show that they are capable of cognitive thought. These guys just saw a means that they could get out of it, and yes, it's a tragedy that I feel that overall they just needed to get out of this Faustian bargain that they were thrown into, and that's kind of the whole spirit, the whole ending point of the Books of Sorrow. That last card. So what's that?
That we have so far.
Right. At least that final card that we have at the moment just effectively showcases like how Oryx, or how at least maybe we could look at it like almost like the New Testament, quote unquote, if you will. And like Oryx is I'm going to make some people mad with this one, but Oryx is kind of like the Jesus, if you will, of the Hive scripture, and the way that he kind of puts himself together. Because we do know that there are the other books. We do know that there's a couple other things, because we see like little hints and snippets with Thorn and a couple other things, and he's kind of seemingly played out of the chapters now. At least of those very small snippets that are there, it seems more to now be like a codices, almost like how Paul or Saul had written throughout the New Testament as well. Mm-hmm. It kind of carries into that same idea. As
far as the structuring, not necessarily the personality. So don't crucify Beard, please.
Yeah, yes, please. I'm not.
Pun intended.
Oh, no. Thank you for the layout, and Justin.
To be clear too, I mean, even the Christ figure is not a unique figure. I mean,
not at all.
And that's coming from me, who I'll be completely 100% transparent. I'm a Catholic. Like that. I will be the one. If you're gonna get mad, that's not a unique figure in literature. Yeah. What? No. And I don't mean to belittle that at all. But I mean like the Christ figure, like that archetype, if you will, as far as a teaching tool within religious scriptures, that is not it's not unique. Christ himself is unique to Christianity. That's thus the name Christianity. But there is not that type of figure is not we don't have a trademark on that.
Mm-mm. Well, look at other religion.
No,
if you did, you would be rich.
Well, we're not going down that road.
Nope. That's
we're not
already
touching that.
Understand foresight.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm gonna say even with Final Fantasy VII and Eris, like that figure has been ingrained in my head since I was little. So the same concept applies. That's why I'm okay with using that kind of idea, only because it's a common trope. Mm-hmm. Trope used loosely, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's just the idea that archetype. Yeah, it's
the hero's journey.
Yep. And it's
Oh,
and
God,
it's
the
a
hero's
very it's a common thing to kind of pick up on. They all fit into that same kind of build. All three of the sisters kind of fit into that same build in a way, but we don't know possibly the other two sides of it, which I think is another thing to kind of keep in mind with the books. We only generally see what's going on with Arash, Oryx, and that's the big thing that I think needs to kind of be taken in mind, is just like how he perceives, how she perceives this idea. But no, Justin, you had something. Sorry.
Justin?
Yeah, no, sorry. It takes me a moment now
It's
because
okay.
I have to.
I'm just filling
I have
space.
to. Yes. No, I just wanted to. I mean, I do understand how the Hive's actions and anything to do with the Hive. Believe me, I'm not a Hive apologist. I've killed my fair share of Thrall, from Thrall McCartney all the way to Thrawley Shore. I have completely decimated their ranks. But Beard, 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 I love you.
Ow.
So no, I just wanted to say that I think the entire the crux of this, pun intended,
Crooks.
the crux of this entire argument here lies within the differentiation between subjectivity and objectivity. I'm gonna call back to one of my favorite games, and I know one of Blue's favorite games, and ought to be one of everybody's favorite games, but Halo. You have one of the archetypal, most prototypical hero characters in the entire history of gaming, which is John 117, Master Chief, right? He is completely selfless. He is entirely noble, and just, I mean, he is prototypical of what you would want a hero to be. Now, if you remove the lens of subjectivity, which is the fact that we both share a race and are human, and his success is the imperative that on which human survival relies. If you remove that and now view him through the lens of the Forerunners. So when the flood is running rampant and John actually stops the firing of a Halo array, any Forerunner scholar could probably deem that as being, maybe not evil by their standards, but wrong. And then you want to take another step to the side and say, oh, a covenant scholar could go back and go over those actions and deem them as being probably heresy and evil. So all I'm saying is that the lenses of subjectivity and objectivity can color the facts for us, and we oftentimes let subjectivity change the facts, which we shouldn't, because the facts are the facts. That's why they're important. That's why it's important that there are the facts. But I'm not. First of all, before Penn sends me hate mail, which is the worst thing I can think of happening to me, I am not comparing John to the Hive. I'm not comparing Master Chief to the Hive. I'm just saying that one man's hero is another man's villain, and that statement is true. It doesn't matter what you do. I mean, I love the example of the Nazi rank and file. As far as are they complicit? Are they evil? Is that evil? Is indifference evil? Is compliance evil? These are really important and not very easily answerable questions. Philosophers and scholars have struggled to answer these questions. So I'm not either one of those. So, like, I don't have all the answers, but my question is is this complicitness implicitly evil? And I don't think it is by the strictest of definitions, is my only assertion. So I yield the floor to the congressman from Nessus.
From Nessus.
Really? I don't know which one that one is. I don't know who's from Nessus.
Figure that out.
Figure your alliances out.
Oh my goodness. Well, I just had at least a little bit of an extra point on it because we are arguing also along the lines of like nature versus nurture as well.
Mm-hmm.
This constant debate, of course, between and kind of playing back towards even the ideas of like associations or organizations. They also have a natural nature versus nurture idea behind them. Is it a natural order or is it a nurtured piece of that order? The same can be effectively true of something like the Hive, or even if we want to touch base on that, Nazi Germany. There are plenty of things that need to be kind of taken into account, and it's as a common and a very favorite phrase of mine, it's shades of gray, which in the end of, I think, what Sword Logic ends up speaking on what we even as the light speak on, as even what the typical ideas of the cosmos speak on, it's this shades of gray idea that everything has to have this will to live or show that it can live. What's the natural cycle of a star? A star is born from a whole bunch of dust and helium, hydrogen, so on, that gets stuff together. You end up having it where that then starts to burn, and over time you just get these fusion reactions that effectively end up burning out this star. This star then, at least in the case of something like our own, will expand from that lack of energy, from expending the last bit that it can, expanding outward, screwing up everything within our solar system, and then collapsing in on itself. It still exists, but did it necessarily live to the fullest extent that it could? At least so our theory would go on how this star would be. Then you look at other stars. Other stars have it where they'll effectively implode. They collapse in on themselves, and then, boom, that's it. You have others that will turn into black holes. You have others that will collapse in on themselves and then shoot the last remaining bits of energy that they have outward in a spectacular supernova. The cosmic law is stated that it doesn't waste anything. It effectively uses everything that it can, or has used everything that it can, based on the fact that it exists and is matter within an otherwise empty supposed space. This is what comes down to the idea of, is the universe inherently evil? As a further, talk and law is because one of my favorite quotes from something like a Watchman, Dr. Manhattan says how life is terribly overrated. It is something that you don't see on something like Mars, or at least as far as we know. You don't see it on Saturn or even some of its moons. You don't see it on Jupiter. And all of a sudden you get to Earth and you see it. And it's just this weird happenstance of like, why does it exist here, but other forms possibly couldn't on different areas to adapt in that same way? Was it that the life that was around these planets were not strong enough to live? And as much as it's a nature versus nurture, it still comes back to the good and evil, but more shades of gray. How certain things are able to, like humanity, survive on planet Earth, or any other species that happens to survive on planet Earth. It's a it's a different concept when you start to look at it from that overall idea and taking sword logic at its basest form, because in even this the Shade of the Darkness does in Majestic will state how it's more of this open form. It is this. If I remember the quote correctly, without bringing up the card, I just have to ask you this question. Can I blow up your planet? If I don't ask, somebody else will.
I don't know why you're complaining. It was signed in triplicate and it's been on.
Look, it's just in the contract of the universe.
It's in the contract of the universe. Everyone gets one. You've had 50 years to contest it, and no one has.
Didn't you get the memo?
Goodbye. Thanks for all the fish.
Yes.
Green, go for it.
So, okay. Guys, I want you to realize I've been playing devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm. No, she's really a Hive apologist.
No, I am not a Hive apologist. I just want to make good conversation. And it would not be good conversation if everybody always agreed with blue.
Yes, it would be. It would be amazing. No, it wouldn't.
It would be terribly well, it wouldn't be short, but it would
not
terribly,
be short.
Something I do want to say is I don't think the Hive as a whole are evil. And the reason why I say this is from the aiat card, where, and this is just quoted from the card, Zavathun asks if I am as much a slave of the deep as my taken. She asks what price I paid for my power. I am not taken. The Hive is not the deep. The deep doesn't want everything to be the same. It wants life. Strong life. Life that lives free without the need for a habitat of games to insulate it from reality. When I make my taken, I make them closer to perfect. I heal their wounds and enhance their strengths. This is inherently good. Aiat. The only right is existence. The only wrong is non-existence. Now, that is for the Hive as a whole. Now, the reason why I believe that Oryx and Zavathun, well, at least Oryx, I can't say Zavathun or Xivu Arath, mainly because we don't have any other perspective. But as soon as Oryx has any sort of idea of regret in any of the cards, which I can't find the card where he talks about kind of questioning, which kind of almost leads to regret, that proves that Oryx knows that there is some other way.
Mm-hmm.
And in and of that, just that idea itself, that proves that Oryx knows that what he's doing is possibly not right.
Yep.
That is my take. I can't prove it
also
for Zavathun.
Also the fact that entire definition can be so abused. So abused.
The definition of what? The regret?
The deep, the whole oh yeah, well, we're doing the right thing because we're making them more perfect. I'm like, oh, there's so many historical connections to really, really bad people that have made that exact argument.
Paging Dr. Moreau. Dr. Moreau.
Not even, no, I'm talking about real people. Like the person who the person who that figure was based
off
of.
Dr. Moreau better,
but
yeah.
Here's my feeling on that. If I'm thinking from a sociopath perspective,
right?
Not like I'm a sociopath because I'm not. But from the perspective of a sociopath, they do not realize what they are doing is wrong. They do not. They do not perceive it unless it's taught to them through conditioning. And in and of itself,
and even then, you could argue it's not really
right. So
they don't realize it because they don't have the capacity for empathetic connection.
Correct. They can't have regret necessarily.
Right, I mean, I would argue that Oryx is not, because Oryx has shown that he has regret.
Right, but we don't know that of Zavathun or Xivu Arath.
But they have shown emotions on other states, and the emotions I have to agree. I have to agree with you on both those. Yes, it will be next week's topic, and yes, actually, I kind of have to agree that we haven't seen a strong
know enough.
empathetic connection from what I'm aware of.
But
again,
think about it. Where would the empathy come from, though? Because the only real connection, in order for empathy to be there, there's got to be some sort of emotional anchor for them to be able to relate the experiences of someone else to themselves. And the only meaningful relationship that exists for the hive is themselves and their worm.
I would say
we're going to be on here.
Sivu?
We'll be on this
Yeah.
argument for like 6
Yeah.
hours if you really want me to argue that one.
Right.
Because that goes into the foundational basis of the capability of emotional connection. I mean that's a very, very large topic. That
even from its base, I would also look at something like Teox or the Osmium King. We don't necessarily know how derivative or connected they were to each other as far as like daughters of the Osmium King, but they were obviously fairly close before Osmium King went completely nuts.
right.
But that would be the connection at the very least that I could see, at least at a very base level without much to go by, just to pull that out there.
Right.
Anyway.
And sorry, real quick, Trigger made a comment in chat. Yes, no. Sociopaths are not... Okay, a sociopath can have emotions. Yeah, they are not emotionless. They have emotions. I am not saying that. That's actually why I'm agreeing with Green. Sociopaths do not have the... arguably do not have the capability of emotional connection, or what's
the
commonly
emotional
called...
anchor.
Yeah, well, what's commonly referred to as empathy, which is basically the capability of emotionally placing yourself in another's presence and feeling and understanding that they are a valuable entity. Sociopaths tend to view others as nothing more than abstract pieces of a world that is all equal meanings to itself. So basically they view other human beings as roughly as pieces of furniture. I mean, that's a very grossly oversimplified definition of it.
Or images in a painting.
Yes, or even there are some who would describe it that way as well. Yeah. So yes, Trigger is correct on that. And to clarify, that is actually why I agreed with Green on that, is because
also that sociopathic kind of motif, if you go back to the original flavor text of Thorn, that sociopathic motif is very present there. And I'm going to paraphrase here from memory, but it was to rend one enemies, to see them as objects.
Yes.
It's literally they're not even living things at that point. They're just, like you said, abstract smudges.
And what better way to make it easy to snuff something out of existence than to remove the empathetic connection to it? You see that a lot.
That seems quite evil.
Oh yeah, it does, doesn't it? Not going to we're not going to restart this conversation. I do want to just kind of in regards to final thoughts real quick. Pins actually said this earlier in chat as well, but the thing about, my entire thought really can be summed up in that all that needs to be done for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. So it's really hard for me to see the decisions of the hive as anything other than selfish, because at the base that is a very egocentrical approach to existence. The sword logic in and of itself is 100% based on the individual proving their own right to exist. Whereas you see with the Guardian, and I think I did this on one of the YouTube videos that I actually did manage to get out, was the Guardian and the Guardian ranks in the fire team presentation is more of what's called an allocentric presentation of existence, which is you're focused on the other. Egocentrical is a focus on self, hence the term egocentrical. The hive promote and the darkness and the deep, and whatever you want to, whatever other word you want to use for that side of the fraction, that promotes an egocentrical point of view. Whereas the Guardian Fire team kind of promotes an allocentrical point of view because it focuses on the benefit of the group, the benefit of the other, even over the security and survivability of the self. But yeah, so that's kind of my final thought. Yes. And yes, Green, actually, that is, yes. If you want it, I'll tap out and let Green kind of.
It's just we're getting to the point where we're going to start running super long. But the reason why we're allocentric and Hive are egocentric, another way you can describe it, is that we revive each other, or we can be revived with the help of our ghost, whereas the Hive cannot be revived or not brought back by each other. They're brought by defining themselves, by having themselves defined through others' actions. Now, that sounds like it's kind of revival, but at the same time, it's very egocentric because it is the act of creating your own being again through what you are, which sounds really weird coming out of my mouth, but I know what I mean in my head, and I'm sure some of you know what I mean. So that's just my final point on what Blue was saying. Should we move on to shoutouts?
Shark cannon.
Shark cannon?
Yes, let's go to shoutouts. Beard, what do you have for us this week?
This week it's just have fun with the new year, quite frankly. Or we're jumping into 2018 at this point. I'm not going to say it's a chance for new beginnings, but it's a chance to just have a different outlook on everything.
Every day is a chance for new beginnings.
Absolutely.
Today's a chance to not suck as bad as we did yesterday.
Did yesterday, absolutely. For some people, though, you need that extra little push. Sometimes that reset of the calendar is a very good idea, unless you're the Mayans, in which case it's a really bad idea. Anyway,
just wait a couple of years, it'll come back around.
Yeah, I was going to say. All of a sudden, they're like, "Wait, new translation! You really screwed up."
Oh, wait! No curses!
Yeah, friggin' math. We got it wrong all the time. The Mayans were just so good at it. Yeah.
Okay,
seriously. But no, it's if nothing else, like I said, some people need that extra little push to go that last little mile to say, okay, now is enough. Now is enough to just go ahead and start reflecting on how I've been. Now is enough for me to go ahead and take something different. And that's what I think my overall shout out is. Just here's to 2017. Let's go into 2018. Let's have a good freaking time with one another. Just start to think about the next thing in what you want to do personally. And I hope every single one of you are safe for for at least live chat, because I don't know if this will go up in time, but at least safe for New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Don't get too drunk if you drink. Please drink responsibly. Please, Mr. Alcoholic Beverage over there. Otherwise,
I can't help but feel like this is some profiling happening.
Well, it would be even worse if you were a member of the Hive. So just take that as it will.
I accept your apology on behalf of allocentric all of us.
That's fair. Somebody play me off. Johnny, help.
Garth Brooks of Sorrow.
Play me off. Anyway, that's it for me.
Yeah, that was the Beard of Destiny speaking. The official Beard of Destiny.
That was the Beard of Destiny. Yes, I've so quickly called myself. I don't know what's wrong with me anyway.
No. Also, everyone know, if you're worried that there's a Beard versus Justin thing happening, don't worry about it. I'll win. So
look, don't worry about it. Mommy and Daddy are just fighting. It'll be better. It'll be better soon. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. I'll win.
Eat your dinner, Junior. Don't worry.
Yes, we'll send you to bed early, and everything will be better in the morning. Okay.
PJ.
Sorry.
This is one of my this is one of my topics that I really love because someone can talk for 10 minutes and then someone can talk for 15 minutes and someone can talk for 5 minutes and then someone can talk for 8 minutes and then none of us are right. So I love this. So anyways, just big shout out to my fellow podcasters and thank you for putting up with me and all the baggage that goes with me and my setup at the moment. Yeah.
What setup? I thought you were just using a couple of tin cans.
It's a potato and 3 strands of copper.
Look, I thought I was the Irish one in the room. What is this?
Oh, what? I thought you were going to scatter when I said coppers. No,
Green,
I was just going to say Green.
Quick.
No, I have one more before Green.
All right.
Big shout out to Vegemite Wins in chat. I've never been anyone's hero before. I'll try to do my best to not let you down, but spoiler alert.
Wowie zowie. Just like his internet connection, it may not go well.
Oh, gosh.
Less than optimal.
Oh, man. Green, what about yourself?
My shout out goes to everybody new who's been joining us in Discord and been tweeting at us online or just having conversations with us in general. A lot of the stuff that we talk about on here are ideas that many of you bring up in chat, and it is something that allows us to just expand upon it. Some of the best ideas that I've learned about Destiny does not come from these 3 jokers over here. It comes from you guys. Not that these 3 jokers over here are
That's
bad
a fair
guys.
assessment.
They're smart. They're smart. But I discover new things. I discover new things about the game and the story every day because we get into these debates in lore chat or Spinfoil, which has been kind of my new favorite place to hang out, which seems really odd. I know. I cannot wait for tomorrow. We're going to just have a grand old time. And I still think Anna needs to be there so she can blow Justin's mind with the milk and the anyway. It's PG, not PG, but you know.
Or her assessment of Zur.
Oh my god.
My shout out goes to all of you guys, our listeners, our friends in chat, our little community of family members here. And quite frankly, from Beard's family and his Discord chat, I kind of lurk over there more than anything, which is fun. I try to lurk in Bifes or Mylons. It moves too fast for me. Yeah. I can't keep up, but
there is a point where a community just gets too large, like I'm suffering with right now, and it's just so hard to keep up with every comment. So hard.
It is, but you guys what makes this fun and a good learning experience for me. Beard or Blue, all the B names.
All the B names.
Too many.
No, I'm going to echo Green on that one. Like, I really appreciate the chance to get an excuse to talk about some of this stuff, because otherwise you would not believe how much rattles around in my head. And so this gives me an outlet for a lot of those thoughts, and I really appreciate it.
So does Ben. So does Ben. It gives Ben a break, because Ben doesn't care.
Yeah, Ben doesn't care. He runs.
Badger.
Yeah, he. That is a very accurate assessment of him. Actually, he runs face first into a danger, and then realizes that he's in over his head because I've been stuck looking at something in a strike, and then
he just doesn't give a f.
Yeah, he doesn't. I love him for it. But yeah, so next week we're actually going to have a double episode. So we're going to probably kill Beard with hype because we are going to be doing the extra lore on Dead Space. And then we are actually going to be kind of continuing this conversation a bit and doing another debate on the Hive siblings. Also, for everyone, I know it will probably be too late this month if you are listening to this and you don't jump into the Spinfoil Saturday stream. I'm going to try to record that. I don't know how it's going to go, honestly. I don't really know what I'm going to do with the recording. I might upload it as a podcast.
I'm going to break it.
We should do a YouTube. We should do it as a YouTube since we're going to play.
Yeah, we'll figure out something. We'll figure out something to do with it, but we will record it. And we're going to start trying to do that every month. The theory is doing that on the last Saturday of each month.
The theory,
yeah. Yeah. It depends on if Justin decides to show up or not, ultimately. Nothing?
He might have muted himself.
Okay.
As soon as you ended up saying it. So now he has to go through all those menus to unmute himself.
But
you know what they said, it's so easy a caveman could do it. Apparently a Justin can't.
So with all that, like I said, next week we'll be doing the Hive siblings and Dead Space. Love to hear any thoughts or questions. If you're not in the Discord, you feel free to shoot us a tweet over on Twitter or also email us. That's honestly the best way to get a hold of us, is if not through Discord. But yeah, so let's run through outro and then we will probably stick around for a little bit of an after show. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our other sites can also be found with our episode archives over on the new FocusFireChat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any questions or comments for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all of our amazing podcast partners within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.